We begin with breaking news tonight. Protests ongoing nationwide in connection with the death of George Floyd. What began as a peaceful protest in Salt Lake City this morning has now turned violent.
Protesters flipped over a police patrol vehicle and then set it on fire. Roads are gridlocked, and now thousands are gathering at the Utah State Capitol. And that's where Fox 13's Sydney Glenn is joining us live. Sydney, can you hear us?
Yeah, hi, Brian and Kirsten. So just a couple of seconds ago, this is the first time that we've actually seen protesters interact with police officers. You can see behind me the amount of people that are here. Just a few seconds ago, they started throwing things at police officers. We're seeing more police officers step out onto the Capitol step. They're surrounding the area so that nobody can go up. I don't know how well you can tell, but you can see possibly the red graffiti that's towards the columns. There's graffiti all over the place here. You're seeing thousands of people. We've been out here just for about 30 minutes earlier before, again, there was the car fire, and then they were also gathered at the Salt Lake City Police Department. Lots of graffiti there as well. Things began pretty peacefully, just chanting, people talking to each other, and then now it's quickly turned into a more violent scene. A police car, there was not a cop inside, but they did push it over, roll it over. People began jumping on top of it, smashing it with things like skateboards, people dancing on top of the car, and then they lit that on fire. Shortly after that, people started hearing that SWAT teams may be arriving, so they dispersed and came here, and that's where you're seeing them coming into this first interaction with police officers. Protesters that I've spoken with today tell me whether or not the police are here. I don't know if you just saw that one water bottle being thrown. Protesters I've spoken to here today tell me whether or not they speak to police or not, they are going to be staying out here tonight. They want to make sure that their message is heard. I have been up there close, right in front of where the police officers are and where the protesters are. I haven't heard the police officers say anything. They're staying stone cold there as protesters are yelling at them. They're throwing things at them, and you can continue to hear them chanting. Brian and Kirsten.
And Sydney, a very active situation there still hours later, and you've been there for the bulk of this. What is the feeling like out there? What's the feeling between protesters and now the police are there? And are these protesters just targeting government buildings, as we saw the police car and now the Capitol, or have they targeted local businesses as well?
I haven't seen them target any local businesses yet, but we have seen a lot of graffiti throughout the streets here. Protesters that I talked to told me that they're just not stopping. We haven't seen any actual interaction. When I say there's interaction, the police officers are standing here, and then you have a protester here, but they're not actually talking back and forth with them. It seems like that is what protesters are trying to do at this point, is trying to get the police officers' attention, throwing water at them. I saw somebody even throwing grass at them, screaming at them, just trying to get their attention. Throughout the day, it kind of started calmer, I would say, mostly people in cars. There was one incident where there was a President Trump supporter there, and a lot of the protesters were very angry about that, so they started screaming at that protester, and those protesters quickly got into their car and drove off. But other than that, we hadn't seen anything. Once that car turned over and was set on fire, the mood completely changed.
Sydney, when you have the police now behind you, first time we are seeing any imagery of law enforcement downtown, or at least on scene, if you will. When you were downtown earlier and you were right up in the thick of it with the car that flipped over, was there any law enforcement presence nearby, or was it just that one vehicle that you saw?
That was the only vehicle that I saw, and people nearby, I asked several people, because we got there right as the car went on fire, and people nearby told me that there wasn't a cop in there. I guess that police car was parked, and then people started graffitiing it and then turned it over. But we haven't seen police. A couple different times people came running towards us saying, SWAT is here, but we didn't hear. I quickly want to show people are running for some reason. I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but you're seeing people sprinting, and so we want to figure out what exactly is going on there. We have, again, heard reports that SWAT's coming. I don't know if that's what we're seeing.
And Sydney,
right
we're
now,
going to cut you off right now. Sprinting. We do know that a SWAT situation is downtown further where this protest first started. So Sydney, we will check in back with you in just a second.
Sydney, thank you. Let's head over to Spencer Joseph, who is live downtown now, where we've heard reports of looting, where we've seen now public property smashed with the UTA Tracks building there. Spencer, what are you seeing, and where are you right now?
Yeah, right behind us, the SWAT team has just showed up. I'm going to get out of the way, and my partner behind the camera is going to zoom in. Now, right where you see that SWAT team is where a Salt Lake City police officer cruiser is sitting in the road burn. Now, it looks like they are talking to a couple of people. Full riot gear. You can see the Salt Lake City vehicle there. Looks like some sort of armored vehicle that they have. There are a couple along the street, but all through this area, they have been vandalizing all the track stops that are here at 200 East and 400 South, right in front of the library. But if you take a look right at the track station, you could see all of that glass was smashed. People took their skateboards and they took signs that were laying in the road and smashed all of that. Now, if we take another look, you can see there are a lot of cars around this area that are holding up signs. That was the original intention of this protest. It was supposed to be a peaceful car caravan. No one was actually supposed to be walking around, but you can see that has changed dramatically since this protest started at about 11 o'clock this morning. I was there right when it started. It was not like this. It was very peaceful. They had actually social distanced into groups of about 20 to walk for those few that walked. Everyone else were in their cars, and you can see now they have all taken to the streets. If we look right there, some man actually just threw a sign at that police cruiser, and oh, that looks like one of the scooters, a bird scooter that was on the side of the street. Now, that was actually a part of the burned rubble that was there. There were several scooters we saw tossing people, but just to the right of that, right outside the city library, you can see a group of people is starting to form. They look like they're holding signs against those Salt Lake City police officers, again in full riot gear. This is developing right as we hit the air. It was actually starting to calm down a little bit, and now significantly ramping up here on the corner of 400 South and 200 East. Another thing I wanted to mention is that today we talked with the organizer yesterday, and the whole point behind why they were in cars originally was to protect people from novel coronavirus. But very quickly, people started to swarm the police station, Salt Lake City police station, a couple of blocks away. We were there when a couple of people actually climbed up on top, started vandalizing, started spray painting everything. But yeah, I mean, we'll stay with this situation here as it unfolds. More and more people seem to be coming from every direction, whether it be City Hall or down 400 South, and they are standing in opposition to the Salt Lake City police officers that have just arrived in full riot gear. Now, we're going to continue to stay with everything here and watch this situation as it develops. It does look like there are still, I mean, if we take a look right here, there's still a couple of cars that are holding up signs. You can see this Honda right here that says Black Lives Matter, holding it out the sunroof. We've been seeing those kind of going around this 5-6 block radius all day long. Oh, it looks like people are starting to throw maybe water bottles at police. More people are continuing to show up. This is unfolding before all of our very own eyes. And you could see it right there. Yeah, people throwing water bottles towards that armored vehicle. And yeah, definitely trying to face in opposition to those Salt Lake City police officers. Again, this is not how this has been all day long. It at one point was very peaceful, even socially distant. Most people were in cars. They were chanting, and then all of a sudden vandalism started, but still peaceful. And now you see that turned over police car, or what you can't see of it anymore because it's covered by so many people, as well as the police now showing up. And all of these track stations all along 400 South have been completely destroyed. People definitely throwing stuff through them. This is definitely a active scene, and we're going to stay with it as long as we can. For now, I'm going to toss it back to you, but we're going to try and stay with it and make sure to get all of those visuals for now. But back to you in studio.
Stay safe out there, Spencer. Thank you. And again, within just the past 15 minutes, we saw the SWAT team go downtown Salt Lake City, and then at the Capitol, we have UHP, as well as other organizations there outside of the Capitol, so people can't go up to the steps. And right now, we're going to go to a live interview with Chris Burbank. Of course, he's the the former Salt Lake City police chief. And Chris, you were with law enforcement for 25 years. Have you seen anything like this here in Utah?
Well, certainly not in Salt Lake City. I mean, it is very unfortunate across the country that this is happening and that we're seeing the violence. People have had enough, and it's time as a society that we make or take a stand and say, this is what we're going to do differently so we don't repeat this years from now.
Right, and when these protests first started, it was planned to be peaceful. Did you think it was going to escalate to this point of, flipping over a patrol car, lighting it on fire, smashing public equipment and those things?
Well, I certainly did not think so. I mean, because it not happened in Salt Lake City, in Utah. I mean, we have always had the hallmark of saying that we've been able to resolve some of the differences that have existed in the problems in a peaceful manner that has not resulted in this. And so it is very disappointing, and it's a little disheartening that we feel so disenfranchised as a society and so far apart on these issues that we cannot resolve it any other way.
And these protests started hours ago, and police didn't really have a presence until about 30 minutes ago when we saw SWAT downtown and then UHP up at the Capitol. Do you think there was a reasoning for that they kind of held off on sending police officers out to the streets?
Well, the challenge that you have in this situation is the focus of the protest are the police. And so to put the police in the mix, I mean, just listening to your coverage, right? The minute you put the police officers in a line that says throw rocks and bottles at us, and then in turn, what are the police going to do to respond to that? And so it quickly escalates out of control. And so I imagine, and I'm very hopeful, that the thought is, how do we keep people safe? The most important thing are the people involved on both sides of this issue. Right? We don't want anyone injured, and especially not anyone killed. Property can be replaced, but we cannot bring back people. And so that, I'm sure, is the consideration that went into it. And do we want to put the focus of the anger in the middle of the crowd?
And are you worried about the safety of officers at this point? I mean, many of these people, you've worked with them for decades.
Well, and I've heard from some of them. And so, yes, I'm very concerned. And I'm very concerned about the people that have supported me. The community of Salt Lake City has been tremendous to Chris Burbank. And I'm part of this community. I live here. I enjoy Salt Lake City. And I don't want to see anyone hurt.
And Chris Burbank, finally, how do we move forward from this chaos that we're seeing today here in Salt Lake City and what may spread throughout the state? How do we as a community move forward?
Well, we as a nation need to say we are no longer going to do any sort of carotid holds. We are going to have a registry of officers and the misconduct that they've done and not allow them to do things. Civilian oversight should always be in place in every single city. And there needs to be a public database of any use of force or interactions that involve police officers. And it needs to be public. We need to have the discussion of race, reconciliation, and what has gone on in the past publicly, openly, and with honest dialogue, because we don't want it to occur in the street like it is today.
Chris Burbank, former Salt Lake City Police Chief, thank you so much for your insight. Brian?
Kirsten, thank you. Governor Gary Herbert issuing a statement on what's happened in downtown Salt Lake City the past few hours. He says in part, quote, "We cannot, however, condone violence, defacement of public buildings, and destruction of property. We call upon the good people of Utah to engage civilly and act peacefully as they seek to exercise their First Amendment rights."